S- So I was saying, it's just the idea help you transition right from where you at right now as a student, and get into a career in law enforcement. I think you'll understand if you're going into law enforcement or any transition from school to go out there in the like workplace or the marketplace, as corporations like to call it. Uh, then schools, they're not really good about that. You leave school with a great education, a lot of knowledge about what you went to school, but they don't really help you transition into getting that job and make sure that you do all the right things that you need to do in order to be successful. This school in particular is one of the few around the country, and we get to travel all over the United States doing this and recruiting. And this school right here in particular is one of the few in the country that does that. They really care about their students, and what they do is they try to help you put together these things right here to help you transition from being a student to being a productive employee of a department or company or whatever you decide to go. Before I go any further, let me introduce you to my partner right here, and as I call him, my road dog. That means that we spend a lot of time together on the road, me and him. And we have traveled from east to west, north to south in the United States. We have gone to Hawaii, have gone to Puerto Rico, doing something that we do. And we do this because we love doing this, right? It's just because we have a passion for what we do. And we believe, here in the next few years, I'm eligible to retire. And, shortly after that, he'll be eligible to retire. And you are the future. Somebody's going to take our place. Somebody's going to be doing what we're doing right now, and that possibly be somebody here in this room right here. So Detective Mister has been with our department for about 13, 14 years going on right now. Just here at the department. While here, he has been a patrol officer. That's where he spent most of his career, kind of just like me, patrol officer. Because in reality, what you see out there on TV, right? When we watch, and I love watching TV. I'm just like you, right? I like watching some of those TV shows, especially the police shows, because I get to criticize. I'm thinking like, that's BS. That's not real. That's not how it really happens, right? So, but the reality of what you see on TV is different, right? So everything starts on patrol, right? Patrol officers get called. They go out. They investigate. If it's something to it, then it will be assigned to a detective, and that detective will investigate a little further, and then maybe from there an arrest will be made. The case will be filed with the district attorney's office, and then it'll go to trial. So that's kind of like just abbreviating the process. Sometimes our process could be as quick as the arrest instantly right there in the spot, or sometimes it might take a couple of months. If it doesn't take years, depends on what the investigation is. Especially when you get into federal investigations, and we can talk about that later. That's a different subject. Besides that, he was a field training officer for the department for many years. So in other words, anytime that somebody came out of the police academy, they had a lot of knowledge, just didn't know how to use it. They will be assigned to him, and he'll just help him, develop as an officer, at least for a total of 18 weeks. That's where our field training officer program. In most police departments, they're somewhere around there, 16 to 20 weeks. And after that, they go out on their own once they're ready to be that. He's also part of the honor guard team that we have at the department. And recently, not recently, probably about a couple years ago, he started working part-time with us as a recruiter, and he realized that this is what he really likes to do. This is his passion. So as soon as they had a opening within criminal investigations, because we're detectives, in order to be a recruiter or background investigator, you have to be selected to be a detective because we play multiple roles. He went through the process, and he came on top. That by itself is a very stressful and hard process, because you really have to know the law when you sit in that room in front of that panel and they're asking you questions left and right, just to make sure that you know what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, what are you dealing with? We as law enforcement officers have the right to take people's freedom away. that is something that you cannot take lightly. The last thing that we want to do is have somebody in jail who's wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted. So that was the process is so important. But prior to working here, he just didn't start his career right here. He started his career actually in Mississippi, where he was working as a campus police in the school. And from there, he transitioned to the Memphis Police Department, where he was there for some time. And after that, he was given the opportunity to move to Texas and start working for this department. So when you start looking at it, he'll have at least 20 to 21 years of law enforcement experience. And prior to that, he was in the United States Army, just like I was. And by coincidence, he was the same job that I did in the military, which we were explosive experts. We love to blow up. Back in the days, I used to love to blow up things. If somebody will build him, I'll destroy him. So for us, it was a transition going from that structure environment into police. It was fairly easy. Not everybody feels the same. So what we're going to discuss today is, or what I'm going to show you, is the application for our department. But as Ms. Adams was saying, applications are applications, right? This was called really a personal history statement. As far as we know, we have one of the most in-depth and in detail for any local department. When people find out their application is 62 pages, they're like, wow, what is it that you want to know about me? Well, we want to know everything, right? And then the federal government also as well. When I submitted my application with the federal government and I was accepted as a federal agent, it was very, very extensive. And we'll get into the differences later as far as like what's the difference in between now and when I was a federal agent, as far as like long run, the application, and then some of the rechecks and balances that they create. So feel free to ask questions. If you need to stop us, just stop me and raise your hand and ask me a question. And it doesn't really need to be about the application itself, because what I really want to do, what we really want to do, we want to talk about what we see day in, day out. So we as recruiters, I come here twice a year, right? Sometimes I do maybe 3 times a year. And I go into the classes, and I know you'll see me in classes. I saw her this morning in a class. I talk to y'all, try to recruit you, right? But my second job is also processing those applications. So as a background investigator, that means that's a different function. I got to put on that different hat. And I probably really, really like you, and I think that you will be a good applicant. But once I receive your application, I have to, by looking at that application and making the qualifications are there, number one. And the qualifications are there, and then we have to determine whether you're a good fit for our department or not. And sometimes, the applicants are, sometimes the applicants are not, and we have to just, discontinue that person from the process. And we'll send an email out letting them know, and anybody who's interested in knowing, they can contact us and we tell them. Because if it's something that they can fix, then we let them know, right? And that way, if they want to reapply again, they can do it. The problem with that is you have to wait 6 months before you can reapply again with our department. Not every department, every agency is the same, but ours is 6 months before you can reapply again. So we're just going to start going through this, and we're going to fly through some of these things right here, because some of these things are like kind of repetitive, like the waivers and all those kind of things. We're just not just going to discuss every single one of the waivers. But whenever you apply, she got another one. Okay. For the questions. Okay. So whenever you start the application process, right, most likely what's going to happen is either you contact that agency, right, and did anybody stop by any of the agencies and ask what's the application process besides ours? I mean, because we're not shy about sharing what the process is. So it has some kind of online application first, right, or at least like an interest card where you'll fill out something, and then what they do, they'll contact you, right, and they'll probably send you the application. Technology is here. Back in the days, you had to do all that by paper, right? They will mail it to you, and then you'll fill it out by hand, and then you mail it back. That process alone took what, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depends on the postal service. Now we have moved on with technology a little bit, so it's a little faster. But you will go online, and you'll complete an application first, right? just to make sure you meet the minimum requirements. In every department, every agency, it has different requirements. Once you meet those minimum requirements, then our department, our HR will send you what you're looking at. Some of y'all went ahead and printed, or Ms. Adams gave it to you. And right now, it looks like it's double-sided. In the future, if, for your information, if you do decide to apply with us, ours has to be single-sided. So when you complete the application and you print it, you have to make sure that it's just one page and one page only. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Every department is different. Every agency is different. Some agencies, what they do is you do it online, you send them back to them, and then we print it. The issue with that is out of those 62 pages, 11 pages are waivers that I need you to sign, notarize. It has to be signed, date, and notarized, giving us permission to do some checks that we have to do in order to make sure that you know that you meet those check and balances, right? And it is from running your credit check, running a criminal check, you giving us permission to do the medical exam, the psychological exam, and to reach out to employers, neighbors, friends, family, and all that. So that by itself, our legal department say has to be on a single page because they have to keep that available in case something happen in the future, and they request copies of that to make sure that that you sign off on all the waivers. I make sure there's privacy laws and there's no violations and those kind of things. And sadly enough, anytime that something happen where there's a law enforcement officer involved, use of force, a shooting, or something where a citizen may get hurt, what happens is that that's public record. People can go ahead and request, and they want to know if all those things were signed properly, like they were supposed to. So that's the reason that our application is a single page. So, and as far as like why I ask you to print it, I really don't know about that one. I don't know if we're just cheap and trying to save some paper, because we receive thousands of applications every year, or it's just us. I think I want to say it's us testing you as far as how are you really committed to the process, right? And can you read and follow instruction? So that's a little bit of the as far as the reasoning behind some of the stuff on the application. So the front page is pretty self-explanatory, right, on the application. And once again, I mean, every agency is different, but the front page, is always going to be a little bit of information, right? And the order of the pages might be slightly different, right? Like ours, the waivers are mostly on the front. Some other agencies and department might be in the back. But the contents will always be the same. They will ask you for the same information. So on ours, the one that we're currently using, what you have right there is the front page, and it's just some basic information about you, including we want to know if anybody has military experience or anybody has like current or prior law enforcement experience. And then if they are still commissioned currently, particularly by the state of Texas, you'll see some acronyms up there. You see the one that says TCOL. I don't know if y'all can see that. I'm blind, so I apologize for that. It says TCOL. Go up a little. Yes, right there. It says TCOL PID number. That's all it is TCOL is Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. And that is the agency in the state of Texas that issues license to peace officers in the state of Texas, right? We have license just like a driver's license. It looks just like a driver's license. It's basically saying that you are a licensed peace officer in the state of Texas. So that one, not necessarily every state has different names. I know when I came from Louisiana, they used to call that post certified. I believe that in Memphis was the same. It was post certified. So that's why it's there, because we get people who apply who are officers within other departments, and they just want to transfer to our department. And then every single packet that you get, you're going to have instructions, folks. Instructions. And we're going to spend a whole 30 seconds on this right here. The instructions are there for a reason, right? I know, I'm a man. I'm horrible when it comes to reading instructions. Men, we don't like reading instructions. We just think that we know it all, and we just go for it, and then we didn't read those instructions, and we didn't uh, did everything that we were asked to do, and then your application get rejected. So our application, this one here, it has an entire page of applications, of instructions, and then the second page to that, which is as well, and you see the ones that they're kind of like bold letters and underlined. Those are things that we have noticed that throughout the years that a lot of people don't, when they submit the application, we see something that is a trend. They didn't type it or they didn't do this, and it's because it was in small letters. So just to avoid that confusion, what we do, those few things, we'll go ahead and highlight, maybe change the color, just making it in bold letters and underline it, and that way it just kind of catches your eye when you're going through that packet. And the second page on our, let's go back, page of our application is documents that you need to submit when you turn in the application. Every agency in the United States, every department in the United States is going to require you to submit some documents with your application. Number one, they're going to need proof of citizenship, right? And age. So the way to do that is by birth certificate. And then they will ask for some additional documents, maybe like your social security card, passport sometimes. We don't require you to have a passport. However, if you do have one currently, you have to submit the copies, your passport, pages of your passport. Even the old ones, they're already expired. And the reason for that is we're looking where have you traveled, whether it's recently or ever, because there's some areas in the world that we feel that, one thing is travel, but when you are repeatedly in that place that may catch our attention and see why you're going there so much. It might be that either you have family members there, or it could be just something as maybe you are a group of you're part of a church, and every year you take a trip over there as mission work, right? Or just want to make sure. So, and that's something that the federal government really, really, really look at it too. So, especially if you want to start applying for some like Homeland Security investigations, DEA, FBI, any of them, they really want to make sure that your travels are kind of like justified in a sense, and you're not going to those countries to do something that it could be illegal here or threat to this country as far as terrorism and those kind of things, or organized crime or crime. So the catch on that, some of those things are kind of complicated to give, because for example, I'm a young guy. I graduated high school in 1982. I think most of y'all not even born in 1982, right? That was just 2 years ago, right? Because we're in 1984 right now. So when I came to work here 10 years ago, I had already been around for a minute, right? I was in the United States Army. I worked for a police department, and I was a federal agent at that point. So I started looking at the list of things that were asking me, and I had pretty much all of them, minus my high school transcript. I'm like, why do I need a high school transcript when I have the diploma, right? And then I have the college transcript. Why would I need it? It's just, the reality is that we live in days and times now that people can make fake money, right? So people can make fake documents as well. And not everybody has gone to college and got a full degree. Some people go on the route of military, and some of the qualifier for us is you don't need to have at least a minimum 30 hours of college. You could substitute that with 2 years of military experience or 2 years of law enforcement. So it's ways to kind of checks and balance, verify that you are who you are, and that you are what you claim to be. So that one in particular, when I graduated in 1982, I told the background investigator, "Are you for real?" I said, "I don't even think the school that I went to exists." So he said, "Well, we need to have it." And I was like, okay. So I reached back home to my mom, and unfortunately enough, she was able to reach out to the school district, whatever was left for that, and they mailed it to, or they gave it to her, and she mailed me. I said, "Please mail me about 3 or 4 copies, because I never know when they're ever gonna ask for this again." So some of the documents on this page right here, once you complete your application, just remember this. just remember this when you communicate with your background investigation or your recruiter. Call him, send him an email, let him know, hey, you are asking me to provide these documents. However, I do not have this in hand right now, right? I need to order copies of this. Would that be okay? Right? And for us is yes. I just handwrite me a note, sent me a note saying I had to order copies of my college transcripts or my high school transcripts, or I don't graduate until the end of the spring, and that's when I will get my transcript. So, and we'll get it. We understand. We just want to make sure that you read that portion and that you understood, and not that you just forgot or just decided not to provide it because you didn't think it was important. So, and that goes for any of the documents that you see up there. It's a pretty extensive list. That little box there is a picture. Folks, I don't want a picture of you out in the club. I don't want a picture of you in the gym flexing, right? I don't want a picture of you hunting, fishing. That's fine. If that's what you do, that's not the picture that we want. The picture we want is just a single photo. If you read it, it's just a headshot. So you can go by Walgreens or any of those places where they take pictures for passports, right? And then just take one of those quick pictures and then just go ahead and attach it to that. Sometimes we get full page pictures. You know, I mean, you'll be surprised at pictures that we get sometimes like, maybe this is not the right picture that you're trying to send to a police department when you want to be a police officer. So just keep it simple, just a picture of yourself, and then just kind of small. Doesn't have to be super, super big. And here's where
says that the application has to be typed. So sometimes the application this thick, it might be your first reaction to print it off and then start filling it out. But if you print it off and then start filling it out by hand, it's automatically rejected. Now, they probably won't even read anything that's on it
they don't.
because you didn't follow the specific direction that it must be typed. I want you all to pay attention to every single direction on the form, because if you do not, you will not.
You will not.
Okay? Yeah, so just wanted to point, that was just one example.
Right.
That I just wanted to point out to people, that it could be something as simple as that. The same thing about don't leave any blank spaces. So it might be a question that doesn't pertain to you, and so your reaction or your first thought might be, well, since the application is so big, I'll just skip that because it's not me. I'll just skip that one. That's not applying to me. I'll go to the next one. But you can't leave it blank. You can't just skip it. You'll have to at least write NA on the line, because if you leave it blank, once again, that's one of those things that could cause the application to be tossed out. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things starting on the very first page, that if you've ignored it, or you might tend to ignore it, that's just an example of how important it is to specifically read the directions and do exactly what they say.
So I just wanted to touch on a couple things before he gets into the document. So, and it speaks to her point and what he's been talking about. It's about the approach that you need to take to these documents, all right? So you need to approach this like it's an actual interview. Approach it like it's your first interview, okay? Because what it is a background investigators or whoever's reviewing your paperwork, it's their first look at who you are as a potential officer, a potential applicant, special agent, whatever the case may be. So you have to approach the document as such. And what that means is you're going to pay attention to detail, like she just mentioned, following those directions to the letter, right? Because that's a big part of what we do. There's policies, there's procedures. So approach it from that manner, and I think that'll set you up for pretty good success. Because the things that we see that he'll talk about here in a little bit are things that's in the directions. So the document is not complicated. It's thick, right? These documents are thick, but it's not complicated because guess what? You have all the answers because it's about you. And usually about some folks that you know, family, friends, and people like that. So approach is going to be very, very important when it comes to this. So, for example, if a professor gives you a book to read, right? And you decide, okay, I'm gonna just read chapter 2 and chapter 10. That's not gonna work for something like this. You're gonna have to address and read each line in the document in order to be successful and kind of set yourself up for success. So as he's talking through this document and you're looking at all this information, just make sure that you're paying attention to detail, regardless of whether it's our application, federal application, local, whatever the case may be. Just approach it from that standpoint.
And to that, just to kind of follow up, if it happens that you are cooking or eating a sandwich or a burger when you're working on your application and you type it, please make sure that you wash your hands or wipe your hands before you handle that application, because you will put it in the mail, maybe not even notice. They say, what the hell, I don't care. It's tomato sauce, right, because you were eating pizza. We're going to look at it. And it goes back to what we're saying is, I'm already assessing you. That agency is already assessing you as an applicant. Can this person read and follow instructions? Because on our line of work, you have to follow instructions. Because if you don't follow instructions, sometimes people can lose their life. And that's including you as an officer. So it's really, really important what she said and he said about following the instructions and reading and making sure that you go step by step. And then the other part is, like, as far as like I'm saying, just make sure your hands are clean. Just sit everything aside and take a couple of hours at a time, because I'll tell you in a minute, we'll give you 21 days to do that application. 21 calendar days to get that application downloaded, typed, print, signed, date, and notarized, and put it in the mail. You don't have to personally drive it to the DFW Airport Police Department. You can put it in the mail, but it has to be in the mail by day 21. 21 days is a long, long time. But if you approach the application the same way that I did approach my midterm papers back when I was in college, well, I waited the day before, or maybe 2 days before, to try to put something together, it's not going to be that great. So just make sure you read the instructions, follow instructions, and you get committed to the process. The next 10 or 11 pages in this thing, we're not going to sit here and look at, you got them right there. It's all the waivers. Remember when we were talking about the waivers, where you give us permission to look into, your financial records and all the other stuff that we need to find out, family members and all those kind of things. So, and then, so just real quick on that, do not sign that application. So you print it, and you're going to take it straight to the notary public, or you're going to have a friend who's a notary public, and you do not sign or date that application until you're in front of that notary public. That will invalidate the application, because if you say, let's say you put today's date on it, and then you take it tomorrow to the notary public, and he or she, number one, should notice that right away, say, I can't notarize this because, it's dated yesterday, today is this date. But if he or she doesn't look and do that, we look. And if those 2 days don't match, we're going to put you aside. We're going to send you that letter saying that we went with a better candidate. So it goes back to where you're paying attention to detail. Make sure that you're reading the instructions, because instructions do specify that. Then you're going to get into that the meat portion of the application. And once again, this goes for any application for any law enforcement officer. We're asking you a lot of information that you may not have all the answers for, right? I mean, the basic stuff where you went to school, places where you were born, places that you travel, yes. But we're going to ask you about some of your family members, people that maybe you don't have really any contact with, right? And perhaps we're going to ask you about your siblings. We're going to ask you about your parents, and maybe you don't know everything that you need to know about your parents. So make sure that you reach out to those folks, and they're willing to help you, because they got to be willing to help you, just to make sure that you provide all that information. Because, I mean, you either have to have a real good reason, and we'll get into that in a minute, why you could not provide that information for us to say, okay, at least you attempted, or, can force anybody to provide information that they don't want to provide. Like, for example, one of the pages going to ask, has anybody been arrested in your family, right? And you're going to have to just go ahead and provide name, what was the crime, and the date and time or something like that, right? Well, I mean, you may have an uncle or somebody or a family member or grandfather, and he or she doesn't want to talk about that, right? Well, you can't force him. You can't force him. So just make sure that you put a little bit of information that you know, and right next to it, just say person unwilling to give information or something like that. Yes.
Yeah, because I have a cousin of mine who's in the county, who's in one of the county jails, awaiting trial for a parole violation.
So, so if you know, you know. If you don't know it, don't. Just put something that, unable to obtain information, and that way, we know that at least you did your best. Because what's going to happen is a lot of times, and we'll get into that portion. This application, when we send you to the polygraph to do, because we will send you to do a polygraph if you didn't know that. And most law enforcement agencies will do that. The ones that have the money, right, the budget to do that. Very few law enforcement agencies hire somebody and they don't do a polygraph or some kind of like a way to verify the information. So, and if you surface when you're taking that polygraph, then you will be discontinued from the process just because it was a failure to disclose. So just make sure you let us know up front. So the first page is all about you, just basic information, identifying information. And a lot of that information is on your birth certificate, right? The place that you were born, as far as like date, time, then your physical description, you should know that. And then as well, if you have any aliases, make sure that you do have any aliases, you kind of list that. A lot of times, I'm a junior, right, and I never used that in my entire life because, I mean, to me, it's not a big deal, but I know that if I have to do something, a legal document, I have to include that because then when they run a check, it may pop up or not and say, well, how come you didn't tell us you were a junior? So if you are, like the third, a junior, the third, or whatever, just make sure that you include that on that application. And then towards the end, it's asking you, and we're not trying to get right here. This is not a HIPAA thing that is to discontinue you. As far as it's like more like an identifier. If you have any scars, right? It's right there towards. I think you saw not the page, the other way. Yeah. No, go back some more. It's one more. Just click on that one. On the bottom of that page, if you look, it says something that's about asking you for scars, tattoos, injuries, and those kind of things. Those are identifying marks, and believe it or not, you have to disclose that. You might not be proud of maybe a tattoo that you got one night that you went into some kind of like wild rampage and maybe had some Kool-Aid and got drunk on Kool-Aid, and you decided to get a tattoo that you now regret, right? I say Kool-Aid because I don't think anybody here is 21 years of age and old enough to legally drink, right? I don't want to know if you've done it, so just keep it to yourself. But right there, scars, physical defects, distinguishing marks. Whether it's a mole, a scar, tattoo, something like that, make sure you disclose that because, once again, it's not that we're going to discontinue you from the process or anything like that. It's something that's more like an identifying mark.
So, if you have multiple tattoos, like 10 or so, you have to list each and every one. But like, do you have to request additional space to document that?
So if you have multiple tattoos, as he was saying, so if you run out of space, then just go ahead and take another piece of paper and type, like a blank piece of paper, and then put section whatever is it, and then addition to it, and go ahead and list the rest of them. And that goes for any of the sections. That's a good question because here you'll see some of the sections. It's going to ask you some questions, and then you're probably going to run out of lines before you're done. So, any questions on that before we move on? Then the second one is can you scroll the other way, Ms. Adams, a little more? All right, here we go. That one. It says to the top where it says, I think it was marital status, section 2. Should have been section 2. Right there. That's kind of self-explanatory right there. I think everybody here is single, but as you go on, right, and then you start, applying. Oh, okay, so you married. You start applying. Make sure that you provide some accurate information because you're going to have to provide paperwork for that. So marriage license, divorce decrees, all those things, and all the dates and times they're requiring you, especially in the divorce decrees. The judges will be there. Once again, you asking why, you asking me for all this because we need to know all this information. We want to make sure there's no conflicts. We want to make sure that in the future there's no issues, especially if you go out there and you're involved in some type of use of force. I promise you that those applications will be scrutinized from the very first page all the way to the last page just to make sure that we as a department, we didn't miss something, we were negligent in the process of hiring somebody. So that's where all that information is requested. Single, separated, I mean, it's just one of those things that, it's just, and make sure that you provide, we see a lot of this right here, where somebody, whether it's, dating somebody or they're separated or engaged, and they put the name of the other significant other, but they don't provide any other information. So that's the reason we're asking you all the other lines of the stuff that is there, who they work for, their address, date of birth. I mean, you should know at least the date of birth of your significant other. If you don't, you're in trouble, right? That's something that I probably went and got a tattoo so I would never forget my wife's date of birth.
Address the common law piece because that's on there.
So the common law, all it is so in this certain states, after living for so long together, right, and you're not legally married, then that's recognized as a common law. So all it means is in court that person, both parties on that relationship have the right to certain things. If there was a chance that they were, either separated later or the death of one or the other. So that's what common law is. So if you live with somebody for whatever, but you were never married, but you were officially a couple and you reside in the same house, had the same mailing address, and those kind of things, then that's what's common law. Have children together, so that's not married. You just common law. That means that you went to a relationship. You just never, not saying legalize it, but you never went ahead and got married through a court. Does that make sense? Yes.
Basically, it's like you had a relationship, but it's not, you haven't signed the dotted line.
Right. That is all that is right there. All right. Children and dependents. I don't think anybody here has to worry about that right now, but make sure that you list all of them, even the ones that you're not sure about them right now. We don't need those. But you know how sometimes you get somebody. Well, once you get older, you might run into somebody and say, "I remember, I have a daughter. Is your daughter?" I'm like, "I don't think so." Right. So, but if you do, if you do know your children, even if they're not living with you, and that goes back. We see a lot that where somebody's in a relationship, they're dating, the girlfriend gets pregnant, but then they break up and they just go ahead and go separate ways, and you really don't know where that child is. At least list the information that you have at hand, and then once again on a separate piece of paper, you can just list that section number right there and explain what was the situation, and at least we know for the lack of other information on the other blocks. The one as far as like, child support, that is not be look on the negative. When you divorce in the state of Texas, most states, and there's children involved, the court will order a child support. Doesn't mean that they're all, that you failed to or neglected to do your part legally. It's just a documentation. So a lot of people say, well, I was paying child support, it's just the court. I said, we understand. It's not like you were, forced, that they were garnishing your salaries or anything like that. It just make sure, the court wants to make sure that those dependents are, taken care of by the court, at least in the event that you do fail to do that, then they can always come back and hold you accountable and responsible for that. Education. You want to talk about this one, mister? This is important.
So the educational piece that, excuse me, that we're referring to, so it's going to start out asking you to indicate the highest you've completed. For most of you, it's going to be a bachelor's degree at some point, or maybe a master's degree. So just make sure you check the appropriate block. And also, as you get down into the schools, you remember it's asking you to go all the way back to junior high school and middle school. So make sure that you see on the lines, it's going to say school name, address, and dates attended. So in particular, what most folks will leave out is the city and state that it was. You know, obviously for most of you, it may have been Texas, but it may not. Some of those we can work through because we've been around and we've seen a ton of applications, right? And it may say a certain school that we know. But particularly if you're applying for a federal job or any type of other agency, you want to make sure that you provide whatever it says. So obviously, you know, if you've graduated, if you're at Sam Houston, somewhere along the way you've been to high school, middle school, whether you're homeschooled. Even if you're homeschooled, you still need to notate that you were homeschooled because that's going to let us know whenever you start sending in your official transcripts, that's when we're going to start matching things up with the schools that you put on your application. Also, as you drop down, it's going to ask you about basically your behavior when you were in school. Have you ever been suspended? If you have, that's fine. Just make sure you explain that situation because at some point along the way, yeah, we did some things in high school or middle school that we probably weren't proud of. But just make sure you put that and just explain it. And you say, hey, yeah, I got into a little fight when I was in the 9th grade with this guy who spit on me and whatever. Okay, that's fine. We'll move on. Now, also what we're looking at, also you remember, everything is about you and your character. So it also gives us an idea of what kind of behavior you probably displayed over the years and whether you're still susceptible to still be having that type of behavior. So that's why we ask those type of questions. So once you drop down to it, it's going to tell you about listing the college courses that you've taken. This is kind of, I think some people get a little bit confused here and they'll just start trying to list every class that they've taken. You don't have to do that, but just make, if there's something that you think that's applicable to the job, to the position that you're applying for, if you've taken criminology or deviant behavior, those type of courses, just list those on there, which is fine. Special skills or qualifications, that's pretty self-explanatory. So, for example, if for some reason you've already put yourself through a police academy, which I don't suggest you do, let the agency pay for it. But for some reason you decide to do that, this is where you'll list these things. If you may be switching careers, you may start out as a nurse or something like that, and you still hold a credential. This is where you'll place these special qualifications that you hold. So as you drop down, same thing, each block, it just kind of says, just says indicate, you know, all those special skills that you have. Anything that you think would be applicable to, you know, your resume, or what do you think may be important, just place it here. So section 7 talks about military experience. So if you've never been in the military, that's fine, all right? So all you're doing is just selecting the block. For the males in the room, selective service, that's very, very important. So if you haven't served in the military before, this has already happened because you guys are over 18, right? So just make sure, because there's ways that we can verify if you have or haven't. So that's a very, very important question. So if you do have a military, yes, sir. Exactly. So that's something that's definitely going to stand out to any agency when they're going through that. If you say, no, I haven't registered, that's going to be some questions if your application doesn't get kicked out altogether. Yes, sir. Mhm. So asking about transcripts, if you didn't hear that. So for high school, every high school that you've attended, we're going to need official transcripts from it. All right, so if you've attended 3 high schools, we're going to be expecting to see 3 different sets of transcripts. Same thing. So the next, same thing with military. So if you do have military experience, or if you've ever applied to the military to try to enlist in the military, this is where you'll address that, a bit of your military history, when you enlisted or you currently in the reserves. But this is kind of where you'll put that information. And it's pretty self-explanatory on this section. What we're looking for also on this section, if you have served in the military, or anybody who has served, we're looking at that discharge that you put there. Because documents that he mentioned earlier, what's called the DD-214, for anybody that's ever served in the military, it's going to reflect what you said about the discharge. So, and what we're looking for is an honorable discharge, or at something that says honorable conditions, or something to that manner. So, all right, you can go next.
Is that a disqualifier
So
for
if
the non-honorable discharge?
so, yes, it is. So we're looking for honorable discharges, is what we're looking for. And I think there's been some instances where we've had some that came in with the general discharge under honorable conditions as well. But generally speaking, most agencies are going to be looking for honorable discharge. So certainly something to think about if you do decide to join the military at some point and you decide, hey, this is not for me, that's going to follow you if you don't do it the right way, if you don't get out the right way, or if you don't serve your obligation according to your contract.
I can tell you right now that with federal agencies, if you went into the military and you did not fulfill your obligation for any other reason than it was something medical, they won't even look at you. So if you get a, so occasionally we get a general under honorable conditions, and then we want to know why was the general, what was the reason? And sometimes it's something as small as that person did not meet the height and weight standards in the military, so and they were discharged for that. That's not a real big deal for us, but in federal agencies and certain agencies, Dallas PD, for example, is one of those. If your discharge doesn't stay honorable, they're not going to even look at you. So make sure if you decide to go that route because you want to gain some experience, right? Life experience, make sure that if you do sign up for 3 years or whatever, you fulfill that complete obligation, because if you don't, it will reflect in a negative way on the discharge papers, and then probably in the future you can be able to hold a job as a police officer. Very important, very important.
So the next page, still talking about military history. So this is basically when you talk about disciplinary action in the military. So usually when anything comes into our office, or usually any office, this page is going to be important as well, because this is going to be talking about your military history. Remember, this is part of your work history. So we're still looking for stability in your work history here. So any type of disciplinary action that you've had, this is where you'll check the appropriate block, and this is where you'll provide your explanations. So when you do provide the explanations, that's going to give us a look into, is it something that a particular agency can work around, or it's not. It could be a permanent disqualifier. Particularly for us, when we see things like Article 15s, court martials, all those things are red flags, and that's going to be for most agencies, because those are some of the most serious disciplinary actions in the military. But this is where you'll list those actions. Same thing at the bottom, you'll list any of those circumstances. Basically, it's talking about essentially almost war crimes. Anything that you've done that maybe like kind of sell secrets when you served in the military, things like that, you shouldn't be disclosing about your military service. And that's when you'll drop down, you'll see duty stations, and you want to list, you have to list, for us, we spent about 10 years in the military, so that's a lot of places that we have to kind of sit down and think about and list. But remember, if you do decide to go in the military, that document that I just talked about, the 214, is going to list everywhere that you've served. So just refer to those documents. That way you can have your dates matched up, and we can verify those. And then we can do that fairly easy.
Let's do the next page.
So you want to talk about employment?
Yeah, this is really important. Right there you go. Thank you, Ms. Adams. So if you notice, once again, it goes back to in pretty much all applications, all agencies have encountered where we want some information. So in the past, before we had that box up there with instructions. You say instructions, and it's pretty clear, it says instructions. We will get the applications, and they will be missing some information just because they say that, well, I wasn't sure what is that you were looking for, what you want. So make sure you read that little box in there with the instructions. And then once you read the instructions and you understand the instructions, then you go ahead and complete the rest of that section 8 right there. For our department, it even says up there, even if you're unemployed or student, and that's a big one because what we're looking for is gaps, right? And that's all agencies, all police departments, they're looking for gaps of employment. And it's okay to be unemployed, right? Especially if you're in school. We understand you're a student. We see it where somebody is a student full-time, and then in the summer, they're working in the summer, and then in the fall they go back to school. Maybe during the Christmas holiday they work a little bit. We understand that. But when you don't list that and you don't explain it, or you just leave it blank, it leaves it up to my imagination. And what I'm not sure is, were you incarcerated? Were you in jail at that period of time, and for 2 months or 3 months, right? And I can assume all day long, but I really don't know. So make sure that's one that we see all the time. So let's say, for example, in an application, most applications, they want you to start with the most current job, the one that you're working at that moment. If you're working, if you're unemployed, that's the first one. You're currently unemployed. Then you're just going to go ahead and put unemployed, right? Then the next one, it will be, you're a student. If you did not work, you were in school for so long, so long. So make sure you list all those times that you were, unemployed for whatever reason, because you were in school and you, had a full scholarship, or, you had the financial means where you didn't have to work and concentrate. And that's including internships. It's up there on the list. So make sure if you do an internship for a police department or company, even if it's 30 days or 60 days or whatever X amount of weeks, make sure you list that and all that information. Because it's important, we're going to try to contact these folks to verify all that information that you provided. On that line right there, as it goes down, and then type of employment and all that, especially when you're part-time or something like a seasonal, right, where you work on seasonal, whether it's FedEx or something like that during the holidays. When you list the reason for the separation, make sure that you just go ahead and explain it, temporary work or seasonal work or whatever, or contract ended, and that way we know that you were not terminated. Something very important that we see right here, you see, was amount of notice given in accordance with company policy. 2 weeks is minimum, right? Sometimes it doesn't, but just make sure that you give somebody a notice that you are either quitting or resigning. That will hurt you. Here's the deal. If you go work, let's say you find a job in McDonald's while you're going to college, and you get there, you're having a bad day already, and that manager gets under your skin, under your nerves, and you just get up and you walk away from that job, that's a problem. That is a problem. So if you're not happy, right, if it's something, we're not telling you to stay in that place of employment, but do it right, do it the right way. And the right way, too, is just to notify that company that effective whenever, whether it's that day or not, you will not be no longer part of that company, right? Just don't walk away, because when we receive that application, anybody receive that application and start looking at it, we're already thinking, will he or she do the same thing to us? We're looking for a stable work history. That's what everybody looks for, including the feds. That's big time with the federal government. They're looking for a stable work history. The rest of the information is, if you're a couple boxes you check in, have you received any disciplinary action? And most agencies and department wants to know whether you were disciplined on the job. And if you have, just go ahead and explain it. And don't shortchange yourself. Make sure you explain it, because it could have been something as simple as you were 50 cents short on your cash register, right? Which, I mean, that's not a serious violation. But if you don't explain it, then once again you're leaving it to my imagination, his imagination, her imagination. My supervisor's back there, she walked in, and then we can think all kind of sorts of things has happened. So if you're disciplined, just explain what was the circumstances and what was the discipline that you received, and that way we can have a better understanding. What are you trying to tell us? Yes.
So basically,
That's true.
on, and then like they can either let you go, so it's not
Right.
technically you resign, it's they fire you.
Right.
Do you also write that down?
Yes, just write it down, but at least you presented your 2 weeks notice, right? And we get it all the time. We had an applicant a few months ago, and we hired him. That when he let his employer know that he was in the process to become a police officer, he was in the final stages of becoming a police officer, they let him go. Because they said, we need to find your replacement right now. And he still had a few more steps. He can't control that. You cannot control that. But at least explain it so we understand. And that was his case. He immediately notified us that what had transpired, and we went ahead and make sure that we finished his background investigation and got him through the process so he could start working and making some money because he had a family. So you can't control what people do, but at least do your part. Make sure you do your part.
Yeah, like when you know it comes a point where you can't, where you're deciding, this job isn't for you, at least let your supervisor know you're not
That's
gonna do it, because they have to find a replacement.
right. That's very important.
I was just gonna say on that one, that one can get a little bit vague, depending on, so yeah, if you notify your employer, then your employer says, okay, well, this can be your last day, because that's one of the ways that they say it.
Right.
Technically, if it were me filling out the application, I wouldn't consider that as being fired. I gave them a notice and then they reacted to the notice.
Right. Right.
So basically, I gave them a notice and they didn't honor it.
Right.
But I don't think that's the same as somebody being fired.
No.
Would you all look at that as the same as being fired?
No, it doesn't have to say that unless the person was terminated. If you were terminated, is yes. If they're saying, because what they're looking at is what's the as far as like the beginning of the pay period, the ending of the pay period. So if when you submitted that letter of resignation happened to be the end of that pay period, there's no reason for them maybe to start, you and then you leave in the middle of the pay period. They got to cut a check and all that. So they may say, you know what, let's just go ahead and make today your last day, and it's just for that. So you don't have to put that as you did your part, right? You submitted your letter, you notified them, and you said they just go ahead and I could no longer be an employee with them. So you did your duty.
I think that's a new,
It's not that they fire you, it's that they let you go.
So
That'd be like more along the lines of laid off.
it depends. If you let go, you're fired. It's one of those.
letting go is being fired.
Yeah.
But again, with this situation that they just described, that's a reaction.
Right.
That is where you actually are the one who put your notice in and said, I got a new job, and as of such and such a date, I'm not going to work here anymore. It's like offer, counter offer. So you offer to stay, okay, but I'm going to stay 2 more weeks. Their counter offer is, well, that's okay.
Right.
You don't have to stay 2 more weeks. That's not the same as being fired.
Fired.
Because they're reacting to your resignation. And so I'm clarifying
Right.
that because I don't want people to be putting on your application that you were fired when you were not fired.
Make sense? That makes sense.
Just clarify that.
So it's fired is just fired, basically. It's not, she already said they're reacting to what you did. And you did what was the right thing. And you gave them a 2 weeks notice. Whether they want to honor that or not, that's entitled up to them. You did your part, due diligence. So I just put, resign. And what we do is once we send out for checking employment verification, we'll get a summary of the places that you work, and then how long you worked there, and what type of discharge was it, whether you resigned, whether you were terminated, and those kind of things. So if we find a discrepancy, we always go back to the applicant, and then we'll discuss it. We're not immediately assumed that something negative. It's just we'll have to make sure that is clear. But what she's saying, once you do your part, if they decide to say, well, let's go ahead and let's start today, you're, you're not fired. You
I think
resign.
the main thing you want to do on that, like he's saying, is basically just articulate that. Don't leave it to the imagination of the background investigator, whoever's going to read over your packet. Just articulate that stuff, because he keeps talking about stability, and what that plays into is when you're going into law enforcement, there's going to be a lot of time, money, and training invested into you. So when we're reading over these documents, that's what we're looking for. Does he or she have that stability, whether it's school or job history or whatever the case may be? Because the last thing an employee want to see is somebody who's kind of all over the place. And so that's going to lead to the question, well, is this person committed to the process? Is this person committed to our organization?
Make sense? So in all the pages, we're just going to go ahead and skip, because on this section right here, it's quite a few pages. Once you get to the last one where you don't have anything else to list, make sure you check that little box in the bottom where it says check here if no additional employment history items, and continue to page. Most applications have something there letting you know, because other than that, it's 13 pages, and then you have to kind of keep going back and forth, back and forth. So you don't have to do that.
So if we have more than, let's say, like, right now you only have two.
I didn't
Of
put
these.
all of them in your packet.
Yeah, she didn't,
They're actually about 7 pages. in
yeah,
there.
yeah,
I
it's,
didn't
yeah.
put all of those on yours.
Okay, so I didn't know if yeah, see, ours is about 7 or 8 pages, and that's the reason I was going to say we're going to scroll through this right here. But let's say for example, you'll fill out the complete 7 pages that we have completely, and you still have some more. You can go ahead and on a separate piece of paper, just go ahead and list all the other employments, and then just make sure you provide the information that is asked of you, just like that one right there. So, it's my understanding, if you don't check any on, you just keep kind of like more pages and more pages until you're done, and you check that last one, that box, and then it'll stop just displaying more pages. So, all right, let's.
There's on the last page of those, down here at the bottom here, it says, if you get to that last page.
Right.
I need additional space and utilize the additional sheets on the back of the document. So if for some reason you go through all 7 of those pages and you still need some more, that's when you check this box right here.
Check that box right there. All right, so here you are. You're going to get into this, the details of it. Once again, what we're doing is we're trying to see what your work history is. As anybody, we're trying to see what your work history is. Because as Detective Mister was saying, it costs money, time and effort to hire somebody and train that person. And what, we're looking for, what law enforcement is looking for, somebody who consistently and steadily held a job. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily law enforcement, right? A lot of people is under a misconception and misunderstanding that that's what it is, especially when we start looking at federal agencies. You start talking to some of these recruiters, and we get it all the time. And I'm going to throw that in there now because I think this is just the right time for that. I get people to come up to our table, or they call us, and they said, I'm interested in applying with your department because I went to the FBI recruiter, and he or she told me that in order for me to be hired as a special agent, I need to have law enforcement experience. That's false. That is not true. What they're looking for is life experience, and have you held a job consistently for X amount of time. It doesn't have to be necessarily law enforcement. Does that make sense? A lot of people, so, and this is the question, it said, well, what I want to do is come work for you for a couple of years, and then I'm going to apply for the FBI and I'm going to leave. We get it all the time. We just had a gentleman that went to the final interview, and that assistant chief asked him, what are your goals? What are your future goals? And he said, start here, finish my education, let you pay for my education, then I'm going to go work for the FBI. So, do you think he's working for us today? No. He was honest. I have to give him that. But it goes back to you are using, nobody likes to be used, right? Have you ever been in a relationship where you find out that somebody was using you and that's not really cool? That's the same for the employers, for us. You know, why would I spend my money, time and effort as an agency and train that person? And we know that you're not here for a career. You're here, you're using us as a stepping stone. When I can probably move on to you that wants a career here for 25 to 30 years. So, no, I mean, and here's the deal of that. Honesty is a big thing, right? Because this is all we have. We have to be honest. Integrity, that's all we have at the end of the day as law enforcement officers. But there's some things that you kind of keep to yourself, right? If you didn't tell me about it, right, then, you know, and they gave him the opportunity. That panel went back and asked that question again, see if he will retract himself, say, but you know what, if y'all give me the opportunity, and I start here and I like it here, and I see that this is where I want to be, I'm open-minded to stay here and make a career out of this. He could have fixed that just by saying that, and he went ahead and repeated the same thing, and they said, well, thank you, but we're not going to extend our condition of employment to you. So, and it goes back to make sure that you understand what are you doing, what are you getting into it, and at the end of the day, if your aspiration is to work, whether it's a federal agency or work for as a state trooper or work for a municipality that you think that you need to have some type of law enforcement experience before you get there, then maybe do a little more research and make sure that that you get in the right information, because that is not true. That is not true. So anybody, if any recruiter tells me that, well, go work somewhere else for 2 or 3 years and then come to see me, I really don't want to work for you. I really don't want to work for you. But federal agencies are big on that, and what they're looking is for work experience, a steady work experience. So whether you work at Walmart, you work at McDonald's, or you work at Home Depot, you work there for X amount of time. And even if it's just during the summer after summer, you went to Home Depot because you were on your summer break and you work there, that's what they're looking at. Not that you're jumping from job to job. You work 2 weeks here, 3 weeks here, 4 weeks there, and the reasons that you resign or you quit or you walked out, we get it. People walked out of the job just because the manager made me angry. If I was going,
And on that, I just would like to caution you with that train of thought, because, you know, a lot of people want to work for the FBI, or so they think. But the thing is, if you go in an interview and you say that kind of thing, you go in there and you say that kind of thing, there's still no guarantee that you will ever
Right.
work for the FBI.
Right.
And so what you've done is you have exchanged a very viable job offer for something that's totally unguaranteed. And so that's another thing you might want to process and think about.
and what would happen is that when we process you out, you did not get the conditional offer of employment, and you go apply for anybody else. When you go apply for that other agency, that other department, you sign in a waiver. In other words, saying that they can reach out to us or anybody else who you apply. And what do you think they're going to say when we tell them, well, the reason that he or she was not hired, is not working for us, is because he or she at the time of the offer expressed his interest in working for some other agency on the long run. Do you think that agency, that department is going to give you the job? No. So just be careful, and it goes back to make sure that you do your research. Now, does it happen? Yes. Does it happen where you think that that's where you want to work? You start your career there, and a few years down the road, you say, you know what, this is not really what I want. I'm not really, truly happy here. And then you just go ahead and start looking for, something else that is going to make you happy, in the long run, long term. So, but if you go express it to a prospective employer beforehand, I promise you the outcome is not going to be good. But I give you credit for being honest. But sometimes it's some things that, just kind of like you're speaking out loud. Sometimes just keep it to yourself, some of this stuff. So, injury on the job and all those things are kind of self-explanatory. The main thing right here is if you click yes on any of those boxes, explain it. If you click any yes in any of the boxes that is a yes or no, explain it. And make sure you explain it in detail, right? Don't leave it to my imagination or the background investigator's imagination. Just make sure we understand. We call it like painting a picture. This is something that you do in law enforcement a lot. Once you get into your career in law enforcement, where you write reports about something that happened, an incident that happened, what are you doing? Is you painting a picture so your supervisor can understand what happened, and then after that, all the way up to the court and the jury. Because if that makes it to a trial, and they're reading that report, they can understand, okay, so this is what happened. So you kind of like just, and that was just kind of like a movie, but it's on paper. So make sure you go in detail and explain. Don't be shy about it. Once again, we all make mistakes, right? And if it's something that we need to talk about, we'll talk about it during the interview. So, because if you don't, you'll resurface. It will surface during your polygraph. And then, once again, you will be discontinued from the process for failure to disclose. All right. Go on, Miss. Yeah, just move on to the next one. I don't know what's the next one. So on that one, and remember that she was saying, do not leave anything blank. So on that one, if you don't have any prior law enforcement experience, then just go to that very first line right there. It says, please provide a detailed explanation of all apply NA. Or you can go ahead and spell completely not applicable, right? And that way we know that at least you saw the page, and that's what we're looking for. Make sure that you saw the page and you acknowledge and seeing this page. When we get pages that are blank and we're not sure if maybe the applicant forgot or skipped that page, and we're having to hunt you down or call you, say, we received your application, but we noticed that you didn't, either fill out or put NA on this page right here. What's going on? So if it doesn't apply or something like that, make sure that you put NA on every single page. At least we know that you're acknowledging you saw that page. It's just it doesn't pertain to you. Yes, next. All right, financial history. That's also self-explanatory right there. Make sure that we don't care how much money. I've seen people that put their bank account 20 cents. We're not concerned about that. And on that, when you give us permission to pull out your credit report, we're not looking for a credit score. Okay. Now, certain departments, certain agencies do require that you have a minimum credit score or whatever that standard is. We don't have that. However, what we have is when we pull your credit report, so we want you to list everything, and there's a couple of pages of this right here. If any of that right there doesn't apply to you, so just make sure, like, do you own any real property? You put yes, or you put no. Then put NA in one of the lines, and that will be sufficient to once again to acknowledge that you read over that. It doesn't apply to you, right? But as far as like when we start looking and you submit, because in one of the pages right here, you're going to submit everything, or your debt, who you owe money and all that to. When we run the credit report, what we're going to do is I'm going to take that page and I'm going to take that credit report and I'm going to put it right next to each other and I'm going to start highlighting. And I use different color highlight for different things, right? Whether your count is good to go or you're behind or you're defaulted and those kind of things. And then we'll just go ahead and based on that, I'll make a decision. So what's important is sometimes with student loans, we see it a lot, student loans. You finish school, it took you a little bit, more than 6 months for you to get a job, or you were working, you were paying on your student loans, then you got laid off, or you got sick, you couldn't work, and you go into whatever default or something like that. We understand that, and we're not going to use your credit score, but what we're going to talk about it. You're going to have to tell us. We're going to ask you, say, so what's the deal right here? You're going to tell us, well, this is what happened, they did this, and what we want to know, what are you doing to take care of that, to fix that, right? Well, I already contact, the finance company or the lender and let him know, and we made arrangements, and I'm going to start making payments on this day for the amount of so forth until I'm caught up, and then. So that's what we're looking for. We're not necessarily using a credit score, but the ability, your ability to take care of your financial responsibility. That is a real big one with the feds. Yes. It will depend on the reason that why you were evicted, right? Let's say that you were in for example, let's say that you rented an apartment, 2 or 3 of y'all, right, together, or two or three or four people, and then right in the middle of the semester or right in the middle of that school year, one of them decided that don't want to stay there anymore, and it becomes a financial burden, right, for the rest of the tenants staying there to pay the rent because they just can't. I mean, you're gonna have to come up with another what, $700-800 a month or whatever it is, and you don't. And so what you do in that case is you go approach management and say, I don't understand we signed this contract. However, one of the renters walked away. We will not be able to continue to stay right here, in the apartment, and continue to pay the rent like we should. So we're just gonna go ahead and leave. So, and if you don't do that, what's gonna happen? They're gonna start, kind of like calling you, hey, what's going on? Your rent is due, your rent is late, this, that, and eventually they get you evicted. That one right there, as far as like getting evicted, is problematic unless it's something like you had a wild party or your roommate had a wild party at your apartment. You were in school, you were in class, you were working, you didn't know about it, and you got evicted because all of y'all live in the apartment. That is not going to be held against you because really, you really didn't have any doing on that. You were out of control. I was at work when that happened. The police came, because of the party, and then they found drugs in the apartment, and they decided to evict us. So, anything else on that, Ms. Adams?
No, that was that was one in particular. I just wanted to address because it's something that could happen with.
It could happen, yes, yeah. Yeah, it could
Yeah,
certainly.
so now we're on here with the have you ever filed bankruptcy and all that stuff.
All right, any of those right there that you check yes, once again, explain it. And not necessarily with our department, and a lot of the agencies will keep you from getting a job. But I can tell you right now, if your dream, if you want to be a federal agent, your credit has to be immaculate. Immaculate. Because what's going to happen every 5 years, that federal agency is coming around and they're going to do a recertification. Because, like, for example, I needed to have, in order to do my job, I needed to have a top secret security clearance. And top secret security clearance, they're only good for 5 years. So every 5 years, they had to do a research. That's what they used to call it. And the research was a full background investigation again, just to make sure that I was in compliance with the requirements for the agency. And they were very strict about that, especially with what I was doing, because the way they looked at it is if you are in some kind of financial distress or problems, you are more susceptible to be bribed. Right? Does it make sense? Or look the other way just because you can take that money, you think you can get away, and nobody's going to know. So every time, so just make sure that's what you want to do. Make sure you're responsible financially if you're thinking about applying with a police department. In our department, they really don't go back and look unless, let's say, for example, that a creditor or somebody contact your police department saying, I'm trying to get a hold of this person because he or she has not made a single payment on their car, something like that. That's going to be problematic, right? That's something that you will have a conversation with your boss, and he probably will go all the way to the chief of police and find out what the deal is and what are you doing to correct that situation. So just to make sure. All right, next one. Failed to file income tax. Real big one on that one. Go back on that one.
I saw one, the filing the income taxes and the failing to make court-ordered payments. Those are ones that sometimes people.
Income tax. You don't mess with Uncle Sam's money. And if you're not sure, especially college students, right? Because you might work, a little part-time here, a little part-time there. Make sure you know what the threshold is, where you are, legally obligated to file taxes. We have had in the past applications where somebody was working part-time while in college, and when okay, well, how come you didn't pay taxes? Well, I didn't think I had to pay taxes. It's okay, so did you find out what was the threshold that said that you have to, if you make more than this right here, a year, then, you have to file, federal taxes and let them know that you made that money. So make sure that if you're not sure, ask somebody. Whether you ask a tax advisor or HR block or somebody. Just call somebody and say, I was working part-time. I only made $2,500 last year working. Do I need to file taxes? Does that make sense?
I just file online through TurboTax.
Yeah, so either or, there's a lot of places out there that can give you that information. And then the other one, it was the making late payments. That's going to reflect on your score. Have you anybody here look at a credit score? When we looked at it, it says like 111, and then it has different numbers and different things based on that. Once again, for us, we're going to look at it. I'm going to count all that. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to clear the federal government. Probably, if you have some issues, they could discontinue you from the process for that if you're not up to date on that. I will tell you, wages garnish. That's a big one right there. Because what's going to happen is if you come to work for us or you go work for most likely any police department, and there's a lien against something that you did not pay, they will reach out to that police department or that city or that municipality, and next thing you know, your check is going to be X amount of money short, and it's by law they have to do that until that debt is paid. So it's important that they make sure you take care of that.
Yeah,
All right.
that one can happen with student loan debt.
It does.
FYI. So, if you have student loan debt and you're not paying it, if you don't pay it for enough amount of time, they will start doing that. So that's just some FYI. That's why we do these workshops, so you can graduate and get a job.
Right.
So you don't have to miss any student loan payments that you need to make.
My suggestion is that there's out there a lot of companies, a lot of business things that you can do online. Check your credit report every once in a while, at least once a year, right? Just to make sure that somebody didn't steal your identity or something that. And I give you a perfect example. Thinking about, we had an applicant a few months ago. It was last year. He was divorced. He was paying child support. Adjustment had to be made to that child support payment because his income was not what it used to be, and it was he had the court order, the papers, it was all legal. But when I pulled the credit report on it, it was reflecting that he was in default because he had not been paying what the originally court order. So when we kind of compared and look, it was that the credit report never got that update, as far as it was never placed into place. So just make sure. And he didn't know. As far as he knew, he was good with his child support and all that. It just it was never noted with the credit report company. So just make sure maybe once a year, just pull your credit report, do karma.com or what any of those, and pull your credit report, making sure that nobody is stealing your identity and using your information. Yes. No. No score. Just that you can show the ability to take care of your financial responsibility responsibly. No score. So, all right, next. That's the one. Not going to just go ahead and elaborate on that. Make sure that you just go ahead and provide all the information to the creditor, the address as well, and then the amount that you owe. Of course, that amount is going to be different from the time that you submit the application to probably by the time that we get into it, because it's going to be less or it's going to be more. So when I pull the credit report, of course, it's going to be slightly different. It might be lower, it might be higher if you charge something to that credit card or something. It was some kind of adjustment was made to that loan. So, but at least give us an idea of what it is, and that when I look, I can go ahead and compare.
And another thing, do you want exact amount or a rounded number?
Just around the number. Yeah, you don't have to put the 42 cents or anything like that. Just kind of like roundabout number so we can see. All right, next. All right, mister, you want to talk about this one, right?
Driver's license and insurance information. Obviously, this is, number one, if you're driving a car around with no driver's license, that's an issue, right? So this is where you'll provide that information. So even if, for example, if you're from New York or Cali or somewhere like that, and you say you guys are looking for a Class C in your minimum qualifications, whatever the equivalent in your state is, that's how we'll view that. So just make sure you put the exact information in, if whether it's expired or not. And if you're driving around on an expired license, that's an issue. But if there's some valid reason, you need to explain that as well. So just provide that information. Do you own an automobile? So any type of automobile that you own, whether it's a car, truck, motorcycle, this is where you'll provide the information and the license plates numbers and all of that stuff. Number one, because any agency that you apply to when you're filling out this information, there's some checks that we're going to do. We're going to do checks on your vehicles to make sure you're the actual owner, make sure you're not driving a stolen car around, right? And just to make sure it's registered properly, because that's part of the things that you will be doing in your job description. You'll be enforcing those type of laws dealing with vehicle descriptions. Also, whether there's warrants attached to your vehicles, all those type things come into play. So that's why we need that information. So sometimes we'll get those that come in and you leave those blank. Why? Just go out to the car and look at the license plate, right? Just go and jot it down and make sure you put it on there. Do you have liability insurance? Financial responsibility, again, it's required by the law. So that's what we're looking for there. So make sure you provide the insurance company information as much as you can. I know for some of you right now, probably on mom or dad's insurance. If you still are, when you start applying, you need to call mom or dad and say, hey, who is our carrier? What's our policy number? Things that you should probably have access to already, but just make sure you get access to that information, because you're going to have to provide that. And you're going to have to provide an insurance card so we can verify that, and it needs to be current. So while you're going through these processes, sometimes they get a little long depending on the agency. So generally what a good background investigator would do, if that insurance expires in the middle of your background investigation, before they submit you for your final review, they should ask you for an updated copy of your insurance.
Real quick on the vehicles. A lot of times, and I know I've done this from my own experience with my children. They're working, they have a job, they're making money, but if they go and apply for a loan to buy a car, they will be denied because they don't have any credit, right? You hear that? Well, how am I supposed to build credit if you don't want to, finance me something? So, if you are paying for a car that you drive every day or almost every day, because it's kind of basically your car, but it's under your mom or your dad or your uncle or whoever, that is your car. So make sure you list that. It may not be under your name as far as the registration, but that is your vehicle. Because as he was saying, what's going to do, we're going to go ahead and run that license plate. And if somebody was detained or stopped for a citation, all that information will generate, and we'll find out who was driving that car, right? So just make sure that we know if that is your case. It's pretty common. It's not against the law. As a matter of fact, the state of Texas is one of the few states that you don't need to have a license to buy a car. Do y'all know that? You can go buy a car without a license in the state of Texas, because basically all you're doing, you are the owner of the vehicle on paper. Now, if you're going to drive off that lot with that car, a good car salesman is going to ask for two things. I need a copy of your driver's license, and I need a copy of your proof of insurance before you drive off that lot. So, but you don't need to have a driver's license in the state of Texas to purchase the vehicle. Crazy. All right, next. All right. No, that's good. Mister?
Basically, this is talking about, have you been refused a driver's license before? Has your license been suspended before? Anything of that nature. And if so, obviously, again, there's a block to explain that. You got to be detailed on these issues. So if there's a valid reason for it, you got to let us know. Because this is the point for our agency in particular, but most other agencies, this is where it can come into play, where it's an automatic disqualifier. So if you're driving around and you've been convicted of suspending license within the last 12 to 24 months or something in that nature, that may be an auto disqualifier for that particular agency. So you have to make sure you articulate that. Same thing, have you ever operated a motor vehicle, boat, aircraft while intoxicated? This is a big one. Whether you got stopped, charged with it or not, have you done this before? Okay? So if you're down at Sam Houston on a Thursday night, and you went to a party, and you was like, man, I had about 4 or 5 and I drove home, you were intoxicated when you drove home, right? Fortunately, you were just blessed enough that you didn't kill yourself or somebody else. That needs to go up here, and you need to explain that. Is that in itself going to be a disqualifier for us in particular or some other agencies? Maybe not. But you have to put it up here and explain it and articulate it that, hey, yeah, I was 21, I was silly, I was done. I realized that was a bad decision. It's never happened again, and you've shown that behavior has never happened again. Okay, maybe something that we can work through. But you have to articulate that. Like I said again, this is not asking you whether you were charged with DWI or anything like that. It's asking you, have you ever operated that motor vehicle in that condition? So just make sure you're truthful about that. Same thing about being in a motor vehicle accidents. While anything dealing with alcohol, this is where you'll put this piece at and articulate those things. Whenever you're younger, sometimes the mind lets you do some things that you're not proud of, right?
Right.
But this is when you have to articulate that, because you're going to have to speak to these things and explain these things to a background investigator if you move forward in the processes. So it's best that you let us know first before we have to find out from some other means, because I can guarantee you that's going to get you removed from the process. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, for us, yeah.
Yes. No, that's a so the application will kind of be specific about it, because it'll get to the place where it say other than a traffic violation. In the state of Texas, that is a Class C misdemeanor, right? So it's something that you really cannot get arrested for it's a couple of them for a traffic violation. But really, what you're getting arrested for is that failure. When people say, "Well, I don't want to sign it," right? And you don't have to. Some officers, what they do is they just go ahead and say, they put refuse to sign, and they hand you the citation, and they'll send you your way, and then let the courts worry about that. Or that officer can go ahead and take you into custody right there, and then take you to the police station and make you post a bond, just to make sure that you appear in court. All you're doing is refusing to sign an agreement that you're saying that you're going to appear in court on this date to whether fight the citation or to pay the citation. So, but yes, it pops up because when we run the checks, it'll show when we do criminal history and the driving record check. So, and even shows the disposition as far as what you were saying. So, real quick on that, I don't want you to confuse as far as like operated a motor vehicle, boat, or aircraft while intoxicated with going out to eat and drinking a glass of wine or a beer. Okay, I think everybody should know pretty much the limit. However, anybody that tells me I can drink 6 straight whiskeys and I'm not drunk, you're lying. That's not possible. It is not possible. So, but if you went out and you were out with your family, and during dinner you end up drinking a glass of wine or a beer, then that's not what we're looking for. We're looking where you knew that you shouldn't be driving. You're like, you know what, really don't need to be driving, but I need to get home because I got to be at work, or I'm in the middle of nowhere, or my dog or my cat is expecting me at the house. That's what we're talking about. Does that make sense? Because we get that question all the time. Well, I went out to a restaurant with my wife and I had a beer. Was I considered to be intoxicated? Most likely no, unless you're very lightweight and one beer makes you intoxicated. So that's kind of rare, but it happens. All right, let's go to the next one. Driving record. That one right there, it's just going to go ahead and you're going to list, excluding. See, you say I said list all traffic citations, excluding parking tickets since you've been operating a motor vehicle. Here's the deal, folks. Sometimes when you pull your driving record because you don't remember, hell, I don't remember when I got stopped last time, or if we even received a citation or not. But if you don't, and you go ahead and do your driving record, some people go online and they request a copy of your driving record, and it's not there, that means that you did what you were saying, and you don't have access to that. I do. So make sure that then on a piece of paper you explain it, or that on that date, certain day, whatever, as close as you can, at least month and year, and then just put as much as information as you possibly remember, and then and then explain it in a separate piece of paper if you have to. Disposition. We had a good laugh the other day about a young man that he was stopped quite a bit. In the disposition, what we want to know, whether you pay a fine, was it dismissed, right? Whether you found guilty. On the disposition, he put calm. So I think he was referring to, was he calm when the officer was writing the citation? That's not what we want to know. We want to know what was the final disposition and outcome of that citation. Know that I'm happy. I'm glad that he was calm, right? So it didn't escalate it to a. But that's what it means. It means what was the final disposition? Was it dismissed? Was it pay a fine? Were you found guilty? Would they put you in some type of probation? Deferment. Where if you don't get another citation within X amount of days, then that one will disappear. That's what we want to know on that one. And then list all the accidents. Once again, go back and list. Make sure you provide as much information as you can in all those blocks right there. And let's say, for example, that you never had an accident. So instead of put NA on all the lines, just the first very top line, just put NA. And for our understanding, that covers the entire section. Does that make sense on that one? Yes.
As for the accident report, is it while you were operating the vehicle or if you were involved in the car?
While you were operating the vehicle. Well, even the single vehicles, right, accidents where sometimes, let's say that, road conditions were not optimal and you went off the road because it was raining, make sure you let us know that. And if the disposition will be no report, one car accident, and we get those a lot where somebody might just kind of like hit a wall or a column or something like that, backing out of a spot. See, my son did that a couple of times. It was the same spot too. I'm like, how can you hit the same spot twice? Yes.
Yes, when I was in high school, I had actually backed
Yeah.
into some other student's car.
So you have to list that. So and what the disposition was. Yeah, the disposition will be either exchange information or the person said there's no damage, just whatever it is. No report, no damage, and that what we know. Yes. Yes. If you're the driver, yes. If you're the driver, yes. On that one, the disposition will be you were not at fault. Not at fault. On the accidents, what we're looking for is either you at fault or not at fault. If you're at fault, that's an issue for any law enforcement agency because at one point you're going to be driving a police car. Police department is self-insured, right? Cities are self-insured, and if you have a real bad driving record, you're at risk of a liability to that department. In the event that something happened, they're going to come after the department or the city said, you hired this person right here knowing that he or she had a real bad driving record and they were propense to do the things that they did. Yes?
So if you were found at fault for an accident, and so what would you put for that?
Just at fault. Yeah. It's not that important. We just want to know. And if you feel like you need to explain, explain.
Just my fault legally, but not my fault.
Well, just explain it, and then we'll sit down and we'll clarify and we'll talk about it. So, all right, next page. Here's the one that we see a lot, and this is across when we talk to all the recruiters and background investigators. This thing can be confusing, right? But if you read the instructions, once again on top of them, right on the upper part of the page, it tells you list all residences for the past 20 years, right? And then it says beginning with your current address, including duty stations and colleges and dorms, right? So duty station is for military. I don't think anybody here is military, but you're students, right? So at first line, what you're going to do is where you currently staying, right then, right? And then the next line will be just, you went home for the summer, you're gonna list that address. Or you went abroad for the summer or whatever, you're gonna list that address. The one before that probably be college again because you were in college, right? You came back. So all the way down until basically the place that you were born, because it's 20 years. I think the majority here is gonna be around 20 to 21 years old. Your parents have probably been living in the same house for quite some time. So not necessarily, right? Some people do move around. But at least all the way down to where you know, that 20 years. Yeah, 20 years, So just make sure that that one is important because once again, we're looking for that gap. Background investigators, what we're looking for is, I take a marker. It goes back to markers are the greatest things ever, especially those yellow ones. Because then I just go and it's like an S. I start right here and it goes like this, like this, like this, like this, all the way to the top. And what I'm looking for is a gap. If it's a gap, most of the time, 99% of the time, it's something that it was a mistake that you made, right? Or an error, because it gets confusing after a while. I just want to make sure you were not in jail during that time. Does that make sense? All right. Yes.
Is there a certain time frame, like, let's say you're doing a study abroad, across, and you're like in a different country? Do you include that as
Yes.
like a 3, 4 week type?
Yes.
Does that count as living there, though?
Because you're temporarily staying there. So, I mean, in 3 weeks, a lot of things can happen. Because what happens is we have to reach out to all those places that you have reside, and that's kind of resided in a sense. And we're going to contact those departments and agencies locally and courts. And we want to see if you were either arrested or the police has any type of report where you were either with a witness, a victim, or part of something. So that's important. And if you don't think that we can find out, we will find out. Because as soon as I pull that credit report, guess what? It pops up on that credit report all the addresses that you have ever lived or ever listed when you apply for credit, or somebody ran a credit check, whether for whatever, a loan or something like that. As well, when we check your driver's license and those things. So make sure you disclose them all. Yes.
Secretaries too, so let's just say, like you're describing, like, let's say this summer, I go back home and live with my parents. I list that address, and then I come back and live at the same place. Do I have to keep doing, like, let's say I do that for 2, 3 years. Do I have to do that every single time?
Yes. Yeah, that would be the easiest way. What I've seen is, for example, like in the very bottom, they list from when they were born until like current, because they graduated, they went back home, it says 2020, right? So, I mean, automatically already with college students, I know that. And then I start looking, but then I see the gaps where they didn't put they went back home. So what I do, I go from like, let's say from the spring, right? And then I notice a gap, and then I see another dorm or the same dorm from the fall, from August until December. And so it makes it more difficult for your background investigators. We can work with it, but it will save me calling you and having you to explain to me or send me an email explaining it to me. Some agencies don't want to even get bothered with that, and what they do is they're going to set you aside, say, reapply again. So just take the time, and I know it's tedious, right? But once again, it's at least 60 days that you spend at home or something like that while you're home for the summer. And that will give us an idea, or your background investigator an idea, where were you during that time.
So, I do make frequent visits, visit my parents for holidays and such.
That's not, no. Not the holiday, the weekends, holidays like Thanksgiving, Easter, those right there, spring break. I'm not so concerned by that because all your belongings is still here at the dorms, right? You're just going home to see your family, or you're on spring break. It's just the ones that are extended, like especially in the school, they make you clear your dorms, right? And then you have to come back again, or you have your own apartment or something like that if you're staying with somebody else. Those are the ones that we're talking about. All right, next.
Okay, we're at the almost 4 o'clock.
Yes, this is really important, and we can go ahead and stop right there at 4 o'clock. This right here is because remember when Ms. Adams said that NA, not applicable? There's an exception to not applicable. And this is the exception right here. It's okay not to know who your father is or who your mother is, right? because maybe your dad was never in your life, or maybe your mother was never in your life. It happens. It happens. However, if we ask you who your father is or who your mother is, you cannot put NA. You're not a chicken. You will not hatch. You have a mom or a dad somewhere. You probably don't know where she is, right? But at least if you know the name of that person, put whatever information you know. If you know some, put that, and then right towards the bottom where it says occupation, name of the employer, something like that, just put not in contact. Make sense? Or if you don't know any information at all, because mom doesn't want to give you any information or dad doesn't want to give you any information, then just go ahead on that line, just put not in contact. We understand that. And once again, we're getting picky, but that's what we do. We just want to make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing. So make sure it's the difference in between unknown and not applicable. It means that it's applicable, you just don't know the information to it.
Is this for biological parents or is it adopted?
That's a good question right there. So in this case right here, if you adopt it, then if you say it's a stepfather, so if you adopted just whoever your adopted parent is, then just make sure that you put their information there. And then in a separate line or, like a separate page, just say in reference to section 14, I was adopted at the age of whatever. And that way we know. So most likely, a lot of people don't know who their biological parents are if they were adopted until later on probably adulthood that they want to find out and they go digging. So that's what I'm referring to. Does that make sense? All right. I think the rest of it that's just a lot of pages of that. It asks you about brothers and sisters and information. Make sure, here's the deal on that. The last one that I want to do, Miss Carol, is references. I want to do references as the last page. Yeah. So make sure that you provide all that information, especially if you don't be lazy. What it is just don't be lazy, right? Just if you can reach out to your brother and your sister, it's not a crime not to know your brother's sister's full birthday, right? I know you were born October 4. I don't know what year, right? That's okay. Just reach out to them and say, what year were you born? Or ask your mom or your dad, and that way you can provide that information. Because what it is, we're going to run all that people through the criminal history. You cannot control your family member's action, right? The problem becomes is if you list your home address, and then when I'm looking through your family and I see that your brother and your sister, right, and I run them through the check, and they are a convicted felon, right, and you live it under the same roof, that might be an issue. Does it make sense? Now, it doesn't mean that when you get the job, we're going to talk about, okay, during our course of our investigation, we discovered that one of your family members living under the roof, the same roof that you live in, was arrested and has a felony conviction. What are your plans? And if you're to tell us and say, well, if hired, once I get a job, I'm going to get my own place. I'm not going to be, living under the same roof. I mean, you can still socialize with them, right? Because they're family. You're not just going to kick them to the curb. But it's a conflict of interest if you have a convicted felon living under the same roof that you are when you are trying to uphold the laws of the state of Texas or federal laws at that. References. Look, the instructions are up there loud and clear. And everybody will have some instructions. You can read them, right? So list 5 personal references and 1 best friend who you have known for, known you for more than 3 years. 3 years. That's all we're asking for. Well, I know him or her for a year and a half, but we're good friends. We kick it every time, all weekends. No. It says 3 years. And if you list a reference, make sure that you put all the information down on that reference. If that reference is not willing to give you the information for privacy, some people say, well, I don't want to give you all my information, then you need to move on to another reference. Now, you can reassure and guarantee those references and your family and anybody that you get information from that information, it will not be shared with anybody else. That's strictly kept by background investigators in our office. And inside that office, those who visit our building recently, we have a closet. And that closet has a lock. And that door, not even the chief of police have access to that. That's how tight we keep that information. So But if they still don't want to give you the information, they say, okay, well, I appreciate you, thank you, and then move on to the next reference. 3 years. And make sure you provide everything, particularly the email address is the most important. If that person doesn't have an email address, then find another reference, because that's how we reach out to them first by email. Hey, somebody listed you as a reference, we would like to talk to you. Would you rather for us to call you on the phone or send you a questionnaire, or even do you want to come and visit and sit down and talk to us about that person? So, but we reach out to that person by email first, and then we'll go from there. So that one's important. We see a lot of those right there where they only list 2 or 3 that they known for more than 3 years, or a lot of the information is missing. Yes.
The home telephone, I don't think.
Nobody has a home telephone unless you're 722 years old. My mom still got a home telephone, and my mom is not 722. She's 721. She's pretty close. Nobody has a home telephone, but home telephone will be your cell phone nowadays.
Because it just, I mean, there's two different.
Yeah. So just go ahead and put it on the cell phone,
Okay.
and then leave the other one out. So, yeah, we get it. So,
And then also in reference to like their occupation, the telephone number of where they work at.
the work at. We're not going to call that place. Not telling. We're not calling to verify that. We have other ways to verify that. It just want to see at least the information matches. So just be careful who you put as a reference, right? And we're giving you a freebie, right? Because I'm asking you to list 5 personal references. So make sure you find somebody who's an outstanding citizen of society. That's all I have to say about that. I had one. It was the only one that I have seen in 4 years, and it was not. Because if it was up to me, the way I would do it, I would ask you for 3. And once I ask that first person, I call that first person, and this is Detective so conducting a background investigation on this person right here. Do you know that? We go through the process. Once I'm done talking to that person, hey, could you give me the number and the name and the telephone number for another person that mutual friends of yours? Right? Because this person that you give me the number might be a real good reference, but the one that I'm going to talk to next may be like, man, that dude is a butthole. Or he did this, or he drinks and drive all the time. So we're giving you a freebie on that one. We're telling you just give us, the 5 references, and that way we can just go ahead and contact those. So just make sure that they're upstanding citizens of our community. That they're not involved in illegal activity. Any questions? I know we spend a lot of time, but here's the key to it. If you take any application, those right there, those are things that have you ever been questioned by the police? That's the big one. If you check yes to any box, explain in detail. There's nothing wrong by being questioned by the police, by being detained by the police. Sometimes, you know what, you might be walking down the block, down your street, and somebody called the police saying that there's a prowler out there, or another incident took place down the street, and the police are kind of patrolling around looking for for that person or for somebody, and they may stop everybody. So that's not a big deal. So just make sure you explain it, and explain it in detail, and that way we understand. Let's say the police was called to your house, and then you said, police came to my house, talked to me, and left. The end. Okay, why was the police at your house? If you said on such and such a date, or during on my birthday, I had a party at my house. I did not realize that the music was loud. Next door neighbors contacted the police. They came to my house, talked to me, and requested that I turn down the music because of neighbor complaint. Explain it. Don't leave it to my imagination, because after 26 years law enforcement, plus 20 plus, we're going to think that, we can think anything. Make sense? All right, and I think the last one is the one that at one point, and all the other stuff is yes. So remember, you got extra lines. If you don't have enough lines on that, separate piece of paper.
Subversive organization.
If you check yes to that, don't even apply. Does that make sense to you? You better check no on that. There's no explanation for that. If you were ever a part of,
18
In Section 18, if it said,
Diverse of organizations.
that means that you were part of some kind of organization that it has some extremist ideas, whether it's the KKK, whether it's the Black Panther Party, whether it's the Brotherhood Muslim or something like that, or something like that. That's a problem. So if that is your case, it's okay to do that. Just don't apply, because you're not going to get through the process.
Definitely makes sense though, because like if you're the type of person who has all those like extremist ideas of hate towards certain groups,
Right, right.
how can you be trusted with a gun?
Right. So, and then the other stuff is undetected acts, stuff like you've done some illegal gambling, indecent exposure, those kind of things. If you check any of those boxes right there, make sure you explain it. And that goes to anybody and everybody. Once again, make sure you explain it in detail, and that way we know what are you talking about. Drug usage is the biggest one, I think. Make sure that you are as accurate as possible on the. That will be the next one, Ms. Carroll.
Yeah, some of this is no-brainers. The
Right.
Constitution bit.
Right.
That, if you're checking that, that's,
I think the most common one that I see on that one is possession of alcohol as a minor. We see that one a lot. Just explain it. I went to a party, we got some friends, a graduation, and they got some beer, and I had a couple of drinks or something like that. It's not bad. It's just we want to know. Explain it. And that one right there, if so, here's the deal with if you never use any drugs, you see that last column, then just put NA on that one. You don't have to check every single box, because you will run out of ink on your printer. Just on that last one, it says never use, then just put NA on every single one of them. So don't just go ahead and put like NA, 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 NA. Just on the last one, just put NA on that one. Like basically you didn't do any. There's some, but make sure they're disqualified. I always talk about drug usage. If you have not experimented with any drugs, keep it that way. If you're currently experimenting, today is the time to stop, is the day to stop. And if that was the case with our department, you have to wait 3 years before you're eligible to apply. If it was marijuana, if it was cocaine, it will be 10 years before you're eligible to apply. And if it was meth or heroin or something like that, you will never be able to apply with our department. So make the right decisions right now, and that goes as well for almost any law enforcement agency in the world. So if you make the right decisions now, today, you will have no problems in the future. And then other topics, they ask you just some questions. It's sort of like a self-explanatory. That one involving a fight, anger, provoked, physical fight. I mean, if you check yes, yes. A lot of what we see on that one is brothers and sisters, or brothers and brothers, or sisters and sisters, right? Hey, I got brothers and I got sisters, so I understand that part where my sister was poking on me and my brother was picking on me, and then we end up in a push and shove match and something like that. So I just explain it. We just want to make sure that your temperament is level, because the last thing that I want to do, or the department wants to do, is give you a gun and a badge and you are hot-headed. You are a ticking bomb, and what's going to happen is you're going to use excessive force on somebody, and then the department is liable for that. You probably be terminated and maybe in jail, in prison. Y'all seen what TV here lately, what's happening to law enforcement officers who use excessive force. And then number two, the agency is going to be sued for every single penny they have for that. And right there, the marijuana, the drugs usage, have you purchased, sold, furnished, transported, manufactured, any of those? If you check to any of those, just make sure that you explain it. Possession will be the most common one, right? Because I mean, you went probably bought something, or somebody gave you something and you had it and you used. It becomes manufactured. That's a problem, right? And then certainly cultivated, that is a problem too. Transported, not so much, because let's say that you're dating somebody that do drugs, and you pick him up or pick her up, and that person had drugs on themselves. then that's kind of transportation, but I mean, you don't have any control over that. So I really don't want to go over this much more than. And then here's the last one right there on that section 22. I understand if you're trying to get into law enforcement and you apply with multiple agencies, right? I'm not discouraging you from doing that. I'm encouraging you maybe to do that. Not too many, but at least enough if you know which direction you try to go. Make sure you tell us, because we're going to find out. We'll send out an email statewide and nationally, and any other agency that is out there that you apply with or show some interest. Basically, you fill out one of those interest cards or something like that. They log all that. They're going to contact, they're going to say, because I will send you a waiver, the one that you sign, and they will respond back saying, yeah, this person applying such and such, so here's the status. And if you don't tell us, I want to know why you didn't tell me. It's not that bad, but if you don't tell me, what are you hiding? Because what's going to happen is I want to look at that application that you submitted to them. And your application with that department and my application, when I look at them, it should be identical. Different formats, right? Of course, but they should be identical, the information. And a lot of times we get people who get disqualified for that, and other agencies disqualify people for that, because when they contact us and they come and look at that application, and they say, well, hold up, he or she didn't disclose this on my application, then you will get discontinued for failure to disclose.
So on top of that, you said before that you can get disqualified from the process for not doing certain things correctly, but when you reapply with say a different agency completely, and obviously you corrected, what was the mistake, and you can see that.
Right, we can see that, yeah.
But would that necessarily disqualify me because it doesn't match from the previous one from a different application? Okay.
No, because what's going to happen is every time that we disqualify somebody from the process, we have to create a memo. And we had to list the reasons why we disqualify that person from the process. It could be just maybe one, which is an automatic disqualifier. It could be a number of things that when we went through that application we disqualify. So when that agency contact us, they say, I got an application for this person, and I understand that he or she was disqualified from your process. Could you tell me why? I say, yeah, as soon as you send me the waiver. And as soon as I get that waiver, and I will put it on your file, then I'll go ahead and disclose it, and they can see what it was. And then later, if you apply, we still got that old file of yours. So we compare. So that's what we're talking about. But if you put two applications simultaneously, or within a month or so, and every single application is different, that is an issue. That's an issue. So, questions on that?
Yeah, with that, what you were just saying, one of the recommendations I heard about that, applying to multiple places, is, you have to excuse me, I just ran all the way to my office, and you know how far that is, those of you who've been to my office. The multiple applications, if you make copies of what you are submitting, then you have a record of what you've submitted, and you can compare whether what you submitted on one application
It's the same.
is the same type of information you are submitting on another
Right.
application. And that way, you can avoid some of that where it looks like, because some of it could just be honest mistakes.
Right. Correct.
But you can avoid making it look like you said something on one application, and now you're changing your story on this other application. So one of the ways around that is to, whatever the first application is that you're going to submit,
always,
That's just,
it's always good to put a fresh set of eyes on applications. Career counselors are great. I understand privacy, right? You don't want to share your information with everybody, especially if you have some sensitive information. But I can promise you, if you reach out to her, whatever she sees in that application is in between you and her.
right.
As well, if you probably know a background investigator or a police officer, and you say, I'm about to turn in this application for, for this department. Do you mind looking at it, right? Because I want to make sure it's correct. We do that with reports. Every time that we type a final synopsis for a background investigation, I give it to one of the other background investigators, and I say, "Will you look over this? Make sure that I didn't miss something, or that I explained everything the way that to where it's understandable." So on the applications, do what she was saying. At one point, you're going to fill out an application that's very extensive, right? Probably ours. Ours is kind of ridiculous. Not too many agencies. I think it's maybe one more agency out there that have a application longer than ours. Make a copy of that. Because what she was saying, all you do when you go apply for the next one, all you got to do is just break out that application. It's already there. Most of the time it's in the PDF on your computer. And all you have to do is just transfer that information from our application, or that one with all the information, into that new application. And that way you make sure you don't make those mistakes. Because in reality, most of the mistakes are honest mistakes, not trying to deceive. Occasionally we encounter the ones that do try to deceive. If you apply for multiple agencies and each agency is different, let's say you apply, let's say for example, you apply for the FBI, right? And then you turn around and you apply as a state trooper, and you apply for Houston PD, and you apply for us. We don't have a problem as long as you can articulate why you apply for every single agency. Because in that way, it kind of makes it look like you really don't know what is it that you want to do, right? Does that make sense? And as long as you can explain, okay, so I see that you apply here with the FBI, that means that you want to probably do some, white-collar crime, or maybe get into counterterrorism. I say, okay, what about the state trooper? Well, I want to enforce the laws of the state of Texas. As long as you can articulate why you're applying for every single department that you understand, so we know. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is we're going to put you and say, you know what, we think that eventually in the future you will be a good police officer, but you're not ready at this point. We're going to go ahead and not move you forward. However, you are more than welcome to reapply in 6 months whenever you figure out what is it that you want to do.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, because I do get lots of people that come to my office, and some of them are even seniors. I'll say, okay, so what do you want to do with your degree? And then, I'll get, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, I just want to get a job, I don't care who it's with, and one of the things I have to explain is that employers, that is the last thing they want to hear. That isn't what they want to hear. So these however many years you have left here at SAM, you really need to be working on trying to figure that piece out. That's why, we just had the one on internships. That's why you need to do something on an internship or something to help you figure it out. It's not just to get the experience, but help you to figure that out. Because an employer doesn't want to hear that you don't specifically want to work for them and the reason why you want to work for them. So that was a really good point.
It's very, very important. And once you have to make sure that try to get it right the first time. And we don't always get it right the first time, right? Just to be honest, if I knew what I found out and discovered later on when I was employed by the federal government before I apply and make that transition, I would have never done it. But that was my fault. It was nobody else's fault. It was my fault for not doing the proper research and talking to the people who had the information, who could educate me and tell me what I really needed to know. Because anybody who knows my story knows that at the end of the day, I had to make a decision what was more important to me, whether it was my family or my career, and my family won. So But the problem you run into that is when you go from one department to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and you say, finally, I want to go work for the airport, or for Houston, or for Huntsville. They probably won't even look at you because they look at you as we call, and I'm not trying to use an offensive term or comment, they call you a gypsy cop. In other words, you haven't figured out what you really want, and you are just going from one department to the next one to the next one, chasing something that you haven't figured that out yet. Now, a couple of changes is understandable, right? You try to better either your financial situation or at least, opportunities for promotions, specialized things. That's understandable. But when you have 6 or 7 police departments in 5 years, and we've seen this, that's a problem. So make sure you don't fall on that one. Start large, doing a lot of information gathering. Start narrowing that group, right? And then you get it down to 5, and then at one point you get 3, and then just kind of rank them. Which one is number 1, number 2, and number 3, and then do a lot of research. Because if you sit in front of me, or you sit in front of any of our background investigators, and when I ask you why you want to work here, and you tell me because I like airplanes, and I like to help, I'm not going to move you forward. Because you can help in any capacity. You don't have to be a police officer. You have to be able to articulate and explain that better than that. In airplanes, I'm sorry, we're not mechanics, we're not airline personnel. It's just we do operate around airplanes. You'll see them all the time. But you have to be precise about that. You have to be able to explain that, right? Does that make sense? So, and that just goes for any of them. So just make sure when you sit in front of somebody, just to discuss the possibility of working for that department, you can explain why you want to work. Have a lot of knowledge. So most police departments in the United States allow you to do a ride out or ride alone, right? Where you can just go ahead and you sign some waivers and you come out. They'll tell you when, and you spend a few hours, a couple hours with some of the officers out on the street, seeing what is it they do, don't do. We do it. Because I'd rather for you to do that, right, on the front end, and that might help you to make a decision whether, yeah, this is where I want to work, or probably not really. And then at least save you all that trouble. And we had officers that got hired, got through the entire hiring process, training process, and as soon as they got out there on their own, they realized and said, this is not where I want to be. By then, you spend a year and a half of your life doing something you really didn't want to do. And life is too short. I can give you a lot of things back. Money, health nowadays, right? Because, technology. But you cannot, nobody has invented yet a time machine. You can never get that back. Make sense? So make sure you do your research, and that way you won't be spinning your wheels and wasting your time. Questions? That's it, folks. I mean, comments on the essay. Make sure we count the words. So it has to be at least 250. But don't be so stingy. Don't put 251, and just tell us why you want to work at the airport as a police officer, right? And just about what can you bring to the table if you came to work for the airport as a police officer. And then that concludes it. The essay is about 3 or 4 pages. You don't have to get, like 700 pages, but at least 250 words why you want to be a police officer at the airport. Questions? Answers? You took a lot of notes. I'm hoping that you're taking those notes to apply for us.